had to wear my new favorite shirt for this video because today what we're talking about is why are Bitcoiners so toxic? Why are they always calling everything a scam? Why are we always saying Bitcoin, not crypto? Why are we saying anything that's an altcoin or a crypto or a token that's not Bitcoin is a S coin, a ship coin, right? Replace the P with the T, you get it? Today, my video is about why is Bitcoin different from all these other tokens? Why is it different from every other crypto and every altcoin? And the reason for this video is if people in your life know you like Bitcoin and they don't necessarily all understand Bitcoin at the level you do, at some point they can ask you, well, what about this other thing? Should I buy ETH or this other thing or this or that, the other? Quick pause. I'm John from My Favorite Thing About Bitcoin. I discovered Bitcoin in 2014, rediscovered it in 2018. No, have not been hodling ever since then. I wish. But the whole time I've been spending trying to better understand Bitcoin, growing my conviction in Bitcoin. And that's the point of this channel, help people grow their conviction, better understand Bitcoin. So somebody I know and love sent me a link to something called, I'm not even gonna say what it's called, but it's offering pre-registration for like a token that they're saying is essentially gold on the blockchain. So they're using all the buzzwords of Bitcoin and crypto to market what is called an affinity scam. So an affinity scam is it's riding the coattails of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is successful, and it has been, now grown from $0 to $2 trillion market cap in 16 years. Other people see that and they say, well, if I use those same buzzwords and if I call my thing a cryptocurrency or a token and I ride on the coattails of Bitcoin, I can launch my own affinity scam. And because there's a information asymmetry in the market where not everybody fully understands Bitcoin, which is understandable because it can be hard to understand Bitcoin. It's a new form of money. It's an asset we've never seen before. So it's unlike any other commodity that's ever existed. A digital commodity that's fully fixed in supply, it's an asset with no issuer, is a new thing. Digital scarcity is a new thing. It's never existed before. So it can be hard to understand it at first glance. And it can be very easy for someone to come in and say, fill that information asymmetry gap, right? And say, I've created something else. It's like Bitcoin, but better. Well, first of all, they'll always say it's better than Bitcoin. Anytime you hear better than Bitcoin, this should be a red flag because you should always ask, how is it better than Bitcoin or why? I mean, I'm sure they'll move the quote unquote playing field of the argument to surface where they think their argument can win. So they'll move the argument to some surface of it's better than Bitcoin because X, because Bitcoin falls short in this arena and our thing is better because Y. So this is why it's important to understand Bitcoin and do the work, but you should start from the starting point of anything related to crypto, you should come at it with skepticism, and you should come at it with the utmost skepticism, and you should examine it with the most rigor you possibly can to try to definitively prove to yourself, why would this not be a scam? Because you should come at all these things from the point of, they're all scams. Everything but Bitcoin is a scam. And if you take that attitude and that approach, when it comes to crypto, you will be better off. And in the 16-year history of Bitcoin, anything that's not cold storage Bitcoin, if you just approach anything that's not cold storage Bitcoin as a scam, you would be much better off, right? So you should come at anything crypto related with the utmost skepticism. You should try to understand Bitcoin, and then you should try to understand why everything else is different. And I'm going to use this video to explain that. Back to this thing that the person I know and love sent me that was like, what do you think of this? I'm glad they asked, because any Bitcoiner, it should be our responsibility to the people in our lives to help teach them why Bitcoin, not crypto. And this thing is a new token that's promising, it's tokenizing gold. So they're basically saying, well, this is the best of both worlds because Bitcoin is a digital asset not backed by anything real in the tangible world. And gold is a real world tangible asset that's not digitized. So we made a token where we digitized gold, and we'll sell you that token and you'll have quote unquote, exposure to real world gold and real world asset that's underlying the token. So at a first glance, you're like, if you don't know, everything about Bitcoin or why it has value, or it's hard for people to understand why a digital commodity can have value. You'd say, oh, well, that sounds better, right? That's better than Bitcoin. That's always the buzzword. It's better because it's backed by a real world tangible asset. Now, studying, I have plenty of videos on this on my channel, studying Bitcoin to understand why it has the same monetary properties that gold had that made gold valuable as a shiny yellow rock. Why is it valuable? So if you understand why that is, why that happened, that helps you, in my opinion, translate to understand why Bitcoin has value as money. And then there's additional reasons why Bitcoin has more value as money, or why it has more value as money, but additional reasons why it's more valuable than gold and why it's better at being money. So when you see this entity marketing this scam as, well, we're tokenizing gold and that's why our thing is better than Bitcoin. Again, if you don't fully understand like that, you can see why people would be sort of taken in by that, right? Now, you have to zoom out. What my response was to this person that I know was, here's why Bitcoiners call anything that isn't Bitcoin a shitcoin and why we regard all of them as a scam, okay? Bitcoin, the technicals of how this works are difficult to understand, but what you need to understand is that Bitcoin was created to be an asset with no issuer. That's why it's a commodity. You know, gold, physical commodities are assets with no issuer, right? God is the issuer, right? They exist in the ground. And nobody issues the supply and no one controls the total overall supply, you know, of gold in the underground in the world, right? Bitcoin is an asset with no issuer. It was created so there's no third party you have to trust in order to mine Bitcoin, store Bitcoin, send Bitcoin, or receive Bitcoin. There's no trust involved. There's no trusted third party. There's no issuer, and there's nobody who controls the asset, the issuance of the asset, or the total supply. So Bitcoin has an asset with no issuer, no trusted third party, and it has an immutable monetary policy that cannot be changed. So it has a total fixed overall supply, and that can't be changed. And the sort of rules of Bitcoin's monetary policy can't be changed. The supply issuance schedule and the total fixed overall supply, et cetera. Why is that important? You're not trusting anybody. So all of these shitcoins are issued by a centralized third party. They call it DeFi, which is decentralized finance, which is just a total, it's an affinity scam. It's a total misnomer. Almost nothing in DeFi is actually decentralized. Bitcoin is almost the only thing that's actually decentralized. And I know there's other altcoin people who would argue with that and blah, blah, blah. But aside from like the tiny edge nuances of where, again, the things they want to take the playing field and move it to where they think they can win and then argue this one tiny point, like Bitcoin's too slow, blah, blah, blah. They'll say, our thing is faster. Well, faster, why? Why? Because you compromise on security and decentralization to make your thing faster. Bitcoin is the only one that's truly decentralized in that way and truly immutable in terms of its monetary policy. And when it comes to like just someone issuing, you know, a digital gold token, what you need to realize is that that's just like some random centralized entity. It's like a Delaware shell company who's just making promises and charging you a premium, by the way, for the promises, because they charge like 20% to mint the tokens. And they're just promising you that the supply of this real world commodity that's backing their token exists, that they own it, that they have control over it. Real quick pause. If you're liking this video, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. It helps the algorithm push this out there so more people can avoid getting scammed by shitcoin scams and can better understand Bitcoin and how those two things are different. And if you want to, there's a QR code in the corner. You can scan that via Lightning wallet and send me sats on the Lightning network. Value for value if you like this video. Now, in this case, this one is a new thing that I'd never seen before, which is promising that it's better than gold because they're promising to tokenize real world underground gold. So that should be a red flag, which is the gold is underground. They're not actually going to mine it out. They're just going to sell you digital token that supposedly is backed by, I think, them buying the land rights to the gold underground and then not mining the gold out of the ground so as to not have the environmental impact and the cost incurred of actually mining it. So you're going to say, well, I think this is what they do. We bought the land rights to the gold underground and we're tokenizing the gold and selling you the gold. And they're charging 20% to mint the tokens, by the way, which is them creating money out of thin air and selling it to you at a premium, because there's no way to verify any of their claims. Like there's no visibility into whether any of that gold actually exists, how they verify the claims that that's true. And then even more importantly than that, there's no direct redeemability for the real world asset that you supposedly have exposure to. I don't know if the token is then going to be tradable on exchanges. You know, they probably try to get it listed or whatever, but even if it is, there's no guarantee that there'll be liquidity that allows you to trade the token if you want to sell it and get out. And most importantly of all, they are the centralized issuer of the token. You have no visibility and no control over what's the supply? How many tokens are they going to issue? How is it one-to-one backed by the gold underground? How are they creating that exchange rate? And then how are they tightly controlling how much of it is issued? And then what if their thing takes off and they want to issue more and more of it, but they don't actually have the land rights that they're saying? Like, Just go all the way back to what was the original problem of gold. Gold is the real world asset that was centralized into government vaults and bank vaults, and then paper currency was issued on top of gold. But what was the problem with that? Well, there was nothing stopping the entities who held the gold from issuing more paper claims on top of gold than they had gold to back the claims. So history repeating itself, which is you could have a centralized entity, could be a government, a bank, or a random Delaware shell company saying, we're going to issue you paper claims on top of gold or digital claims on top of gold that are backed by real world gold in the ground or out of the ground. What's the problem? Well, you have no control, visibility, or recourse for them issuing more of those tokens than what they said they were going to issue or then that are actually backed by the real gold. And you have no recourse if they're lying. So if they're lying, and they could literally just rug pull you and just take all the money and disappear, and then you have no legal recourse, like you have no recourse, you're never going to find them, and the law's never going to go after them. And even if they get prosecuted, you're not going to get your money back. So you always have to zoom out and remember that this is a third party that you're just trusting. You're just buying tokenized air, tokenized gold, but you're just buying air that was minted and sold to you at a premium that's backed by promises and trust and nothing else. So promises and trust are the problem. That's why Bitcoin was created. One of the reasons, but it's one of the main reasons. There's a quote from Satoshi where he said the problem with fiat money is that it's too much trust is required. Central banks can print more of it, and you just have to trust that they're not going to debase you too hard. Well, if there's a centralized issuer of a shitcoin, first of all, they always have a pre-mine. They always keep some of the supply for themselves so that they can dump it on the market and sell it to enrich the founders. That's the entire point of creating a shitcoin. That's literally all they're good for, to enrich the founders by dumping supply on retail. And Bitcoin is also the only one that never had a pre-mine. Satoshi Nakamoto did not pre-mine or keep any bitcoins, whatever, Bitcoin or bitcoins, whatever you think the plural is, didn't keep any for himself prior to the launch. He had the only fair launch that as ever has been or ever could be in crypto, because now it can't be recreated, because he released the white paper, told everybody this was going to happen, made the network open and free, and anybody who wanted to could join. And then when he first started mining, he may have been the only miner on the network, which is why he mined Bitcoins, but there was no pre-mine where he kept tokens for himself before mining, and there was no barrier to anybody else mining at the same time as him. And there's lots of evidence that he deliberately mined as slowly as possible, or slowed down or turned off his miners at points to try to let other people join the network and other people mine Bitcoin and receive block rewards without him just receiving all the block rewards and mining all the Bitcoins. He was trying to mine the least amount he could to keep the network secure while letting other people participate and distributing the tokens amongst other people as much as he could, the Bitcoins. Yeah, he still ended up with a lot of them because at the beginning it wasn't worth anything. Nobody wanted to expend electricity to mine it, or like very few people, right? It was just a niche experiment. It was essentially a collectible, right? That people who were interested in cryptography and stuff might wanna play with. And there was no guarantee that it would ever even gain any real world value, right? There were previous iterations of digital currencies and digital gold that failed. So you can see why people might not think it would work or whatever, right? It's the only crypto with a fair launch and no pre-mine. Now, of course, all these altcoin people, yes, I know there'll be people in the comments saying, Caspa or whatever BS token they have, and they tell me why it's decentralized and why it didn't have a pre-mine and all these other things. They're always wrong. Just know that they're always wrong. And even if they think that they have a token that mimics the properties of Bitcoin enough to make it, viable, quote unquote, competitor, like there's like something called Caspa, which like people think mimics enough of Bitcoin's properties to be truly decentralized and can scale better and all these things. The problem with those becomes they have promises that they think Bitcoin can scale better or it's better for these reasons, but they have no proof. And the scale of the token, like the market cap of the token, is like so tiny. It's like maybe 1%. I can't remember Caspa. It's like a few $1 billion compared to 2 trillion for Bitcoin. And the number of nodes that are running. So they have no actual real world proof that like if this thing were to try to compete with the scale of Bitcoin, with tens of thousands of nodes worldwide and more transaction volume and a larger market cap and a larger blockchain, could it actually fulfill the promises of their scalability and their decentralization? And the answer is no, it can't. Those are more technical parts, right, of Bitcoin and what makes it decentralized and all that stuff. But just know that every shitcoin is a centralized shitcoin scam designed to dump on retail and enrich the founders. And none of them are better than Bitcoin. And if they say they're better, they're saying they're better in one specific area and they're compromising on other areas. And so if anybody is saying, well, we tokenized gold, and therefore our token is better than Bitcoin, you have to ask all these questions. Well, what makes it better? And what stops you from rug pulling everyone and running away with the money, or issuing more and more and more tokens that aren't backed by your real world asset that you say they're backed by? Or what stops you from just not even backing it with the real world asset? And the only answer is, well, there's no answer, but the only answer is they'll try to say, oh, well, we attestations, or we say we have it and we promise we have it and we can prove we have it, and we promise we won't run away with it. There's all promises and trust, right? Back to those words. And I do think that right now, what I'm saying also applies to what is the most popular topic on Bitcoin Twitter right now, which is Bitcoin treasury companies. So I think this video is not about Bitcoin treasury companies, but I think companies buying Bitcoin and companies, arbitraging the infinite fiat money printer to borrow fiat money and exchange it for Bitcoin, which is hard money, that's inevitable. There was never anything that's part of the adoption of Bitcoin. That's inevitable that's going to happen. There's no stopping it. So I'm not like coming out as against Bitcoin treasury companies, but there was a time when anytime someone was talking about the roadmap or the founding team or the yield, those were all red flags those were all crypto scams and ship coins, and you should be running away anytime you heard those terms. And now those terms are making their way over to Bitcoin via Bitcoin treasury companies. And I think you should just approach all of them with a lot of skepticism. They're probably better than previous years' altcoin scams and shipcoin scams that have been run in the past, because these are at least being built on Bitcoin, presumably most of them. But some of them, even if some of them are going to be legit, some of them are going to be bad actors who over leverage, or who make promises they can't keep, or who get blown up, or who just outright rug pull and scam. So you want to approach all those things with a ton of skepticism. And Bitcoin treasury companies is the new hot thing. So I think approach them all with skepticism. You can either just say cold storage Bitcoin and that's all I'm ever going to do, and you'll be just fine if that's what you do, right? Because that's the one thing that has proven will not get you wrecked. Or you can approach any Bitcoin treasury company with the utmost skepticism and rigorously examine it to determine why you think it's not a scam, or why you think it might be something you want to invest in, because you have other outcomes you're trying to accomplish other than holding cold storage Bitcoin. That's a personal investment decision for each person, but just know that Bitcoin treasury companies are Bitcoin exposure. They're not Bitcoin. So you're trying to get exposure to Bitcoin price action and something that a treasury company you think can accomplish that's better than you just holding Bitcoin. So just know that they're very different things. That was a little bit of a tangent. Back to, now this video doesn't go all the way into why Bitcoin is decentralized, why it has the monetary properties that make it good and useful at being money, and why it's trustless and permissionless. I have other videos on that. But this video, I just wanted to go on a rant about why Bitcoin is different from all ship coins, altcoins, cryptos, because this is why like all ship coins are like the bane of a Bitcoiner's existence, because the conflation of Bitcoin and crypto is an annoying phenomenon that we always have to fight against. It is complex and hard for people to understand. They think all crypto, Bitcoin fits under this label of cryptocurrency, colloquially. But in reality, Bitcoiners are more fond of saying crypto is a part of fiat land and Bitcoin is outside that, right? Bitcoin is its own different thing, and crypto is just part of fiat land. That's just the same, old school fiat scams being run on a blockchain using buzzwords and marketing to try to confuse you and make you think these things are the same as Bitcoin when they're not. So that's why it's important to study Bitcoin, understand the properties, understand what makes it decentralized, what makes it different, what makes it an asset with no issuer, what makes it trustless. And so that's why, we out here doing the hard work of trying to educate people. So like I said, I will link here in the corner a video that can explain more about in-depth about Bitcoin's properties and why it's trustless, permissionless digital money that has asset with no issuer, why it's valuable, why it has value as money because of the monetary properties. So watch that. And as always, thank you for watching, and never forget, Bitcoin, not crypto. Bitcoin is inevitable.